All right. Hello, folks, and this is a recorded lecture for the Monday we're going to be missing because of the pipe burst in the English department building, and room 102 is apparently under severe construction, and we no longer have our classroom. And as there's no larger auditorium-sized classrooms for us to meet on campus, we are to be conducting this class online. So that said, we're doing our introduction today to Mahmoud Darwish and Adonis, the two contemporary or modern, more recent Arabic poets, one Syrian, one Palestinian, who we'll be covering at the end of the semester. This also is part of the semester that we take a break from the grand narrative of the epic poem and then the heightened mysticism of the Sufi poetry, and we go into the modern, the realistic, and the kind of the specific as far as the voice goes of the poet himself. Each of the poets we're going to read for the rest of this semester has a very specific voice, has a very determined style, and a very determined subject matter, as well as the way they approach that matter. And so it's important that we begin to saturate our consciousnesses, if possible, with the work of these poets. With not just the work of these poets, but also the manner in which they create the work, such that you could be able to read a poem by Darwish that you have not read before, not have his name on it, and be able to identify, oh, that's Darwish because of this, this, and this. What are the poet's style? What are their elements of their creation of their craft? What are their linguistic turns? What are their themes they deal with? What are their symbols they use often and return to? These are questions we have to ask ourselves for each poet we hit from here out in the semester, because there's going to be an exam forthcoming in which we have to identify poems written by each of the poets at the end of the semester when they don't have their name on the poem. So here's a poem. Who wrote it? Based on style, tone, theme, word choice, topic, etc. But no helping bibliographic material, no helping biographical material. So be ready for this by reading these poems thoroughly and trying to get a sense of what Darwish is as a poet and how he writes his poetry, so you can identify his poetry even if you don't know who wrote a poem and you see it. All right. So that's it. Darwish was born in 1942 in the village of Al-Bara in Palestine. One night in 1948, the Israeli armed forces assaulted the village. Darwish's family fled through a forest, bullets winging overhead, and reached Lebanon, where they remained for more than a year, living in the meager handouts of the United Nations. Finally, Darwish was led by his uncle back across the border to the village of Dar al-Assad in Galilee. They could not return to Al-Bara, for it had been obliterated by the Israeli soldiers. All that had happened, Darwish told the Israeli communist newspaper Zohadak in an interview in 1969, was that the refugee had exchanged his old address for a new one. I had become refugee in Lebanon, and now I was refugee in my own country. So this is the basic backdrop to Darwish's poetry, is he was at a young age forced into exile in Lebanon by the IDF, and then he returned to Palestine kind of to take up the mantle of the Palestinian exile, the disenfranchised individual within the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian community. And so this is something that permeates all his poetry, right? The theme of the exile is the first theme that Darwish touches, and he touches on it deeply. Not just the exile as in exiled from Palestine, exiled from society, but exiled within society. A stranger within one's own land, an exile within one's own house, or within one's own town, within one's own country, right? And so this is something that he turns to over and over again in his poetry. So exile, big theme in Arabic poetry, bigger theme in Darwish. The other point that Darwish likes to bring up in his poetry is the political side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the colonial side of the Israeli occupation of Palestine, as he phrases it, right? So Darwish is very overtly political and also very violent in his poetry, as opposed to our other authors we're going to read this semester. So Darwish has the unfortunate reputation, and unfortunately it's true about him, that he supported oftentimes the Palestinian Authority, the PLO as well, Yasser Arafat, and condoned suicide bombings against Israeli civilians in both poetry and in public statements he made for Arafat, as well as himself as an intellectual. And so this is one kind of a crux we have to deal with when we decide to teach Darwish or not, is that how good is his poetry, how important is his poetry to understanding the Arabic poetic oeuvre over the last 20 years, to include his poetry in the class, granted the fact that he supported suicide bombings of civilians in his poetry and in his political speech. I'm of the opinion that the gravity of the poetry is essential to the understanding of the Arabic poetic movement in the last 20 years, regardless of his political or his personal beliefs and statements. And so we should take with a grain of salt, however, that Smith's poetry is overtly anti-Israel, somewhat anti-Semitic, overtly anti the United States and the West, but also pro-violence and against innocence. And so this makes an ethical problem when dealing with his poetry too, is if we see these violent images and they seem to tilt that way, how do we read them? And the answer is we must read them as having that open possibility for intoning violence against innocence, and that's something we have to look at with a different kind of way when we read the poetry. None of our other poets have this kind of open condoning of violence or this open endorsement of violent acts. Muhammad Darwish is very overtly these kind of an instigator and a resistance poetry writer. All right. So some of his poetry is exemplified. So again, the themes of exile, of people leaving the town, of homelessness, of not being able to find a home on the earth, of the poet always in transience, and unable to find a place to put his head down, find a place to have his culture, find a place to have a family, right? Is always in exile no matter where he goes. So the first poem we'll read is, "The earth is closing on us. The earth is closing on us, pushing us through the last passage, and we tear off our limbs to pass through. The earth is squeezing us. I wish we were its wheat, so we could die and live again. I wish the earth was our mother, so she would be kind to us. I wish we were pictures on the rocks for our dreams to carry all its mirrors. We saw the faces of those to be killed by the last of us in the last defiance of the soul. We cried over the children's feast. We saw the faces of those who'll throw our children out of windows of this last space. Our star will hang upon mirrors. Where should we go after the last frontiers? Where should the birds fly after the last sky? Where should the plants sleep after the last breath of air? We will write our names on the scarlet stem. We will cut off the hand of the song, be finished by our flesh. We will die here, here in the last passage. Here and here our blood will plant its olive tree." All right, a lot there, big poem, dense poem, all kinds of stuff going on here, right? So we have the idea, first off, the earth is closing on us, pushing us through the last passage. We have a double entendre with passage here, right? Passage both being the ending speech, the finalizing of the poem, the finalizing of the speech act, as well as passages in a passage through land, like the Northwest Passage or a pass in the mountain pass, right? So we have the earth closing in on us, both the whole idea of political isolation and of political defeat that the Palestinian Authority is constantly under pressure of. The earth is closing in on us. We have no earth to call our own. We have no place to label our own homeland, no place to build our houses, no place to have a nationality and a nation state, as well as the last passage, the final word, is closing on them as well. We tear off our limbs to pass through. So again, both the last passage, meaning like the last speech, the last action that is intoning this political situation, right, is referencing maybe suicide bombing with the limbs being torn off to pass through to the next life. Also, the last passage being the final passage of the book, right? Time for the limbs to pass through to the end of the book, the end of the argument, the end of the political statement, and also the last passage of tearing off their arms to go through the earth to the checkpoint or to the afterlife. The earth is squeezing us. I wish we were its wheat so we could die and live again. I wish the earth was our mother. So the notion of death through the earth, the notion of death and rebirth, is something that happens oftentimes in Arabic poetry. This oftentimes is reflected back to a fertility myth and fertility ritual. Attis, Adonis, Osiris is the names of the gods prevalent in the myth, depending on whether you're in Egypt, Mesopotamia, or Babylon. And so each of these myths, the god, Attis, Adonis, or Osiris, are sacrificed at the end of this year. And the limbs of these gods are dismembered and buried in different parts across the country and in crop fields. And the goal is that by reinterring the god's body into the earth, it reabsorbs the divine presence and brings the crops to come anew in the springtime, right? So you plant Attis's body with your corn, because if you don't plant it, the corn's not going to revive again. So every time the corn revives in the spring, it's actually Attis reviving. So it's the resurrection of a dying god or a dead god. And that's what brings the spring anew to these Middle Eastern civilizations. And so not only that, but we also have what is largely considered a pre-typology of the Christ narrative, or a precursor of that, or a pagan version of that, in Isis's collection of Osiris's limbs. So if you remember early in the semester, we had that section by pound in where he wrote the Seafarer translation, and it was called I Gather the Limbs of Osiris. Now that's a reference to the Isis myth, where Osiris, her son, is caught up and dismembered and spread his limbs all across the whole country of Egypt and planted with the crops so they'll revive in the spring. Isis, his mother, goes out and collects all of his limbs from the crop fields and reassembles her son and then revivifies him, or he's resurrected at that point in time, and he becomes alive again, as do the crops. And so you have an example here of a god who sacrificed for the good of the land, and that the death of the god brings new life into the fertility cult, into the fertility cycle, and spring and plants come anew. So this is the reference that we're hitting here with the earth squeezing us, and that we could die as wheat and live again, right? Because wheat, if you remember, it's a crop. You plant it, it's born, you harvest it, you hack it down, you use the wheat, the grain, and then the next year it is reborn again, right? It's a cyclical crop. And so that would be a good thing, but people aren't like that, right? People are unique individual lives and don't have a regeneration cycle like wheat does, right? He wishes the earth was our mother. She'd be kind to us. I wish that there were pictures of rocks for our dreams to carry. So again, the earth now is configured as hostile to Darwish, hostile to the Palestinian people, hostile because it has no land for them, and therefore wishing that the earth would be kind to them, right? Personification of the earth here as well, right? I wish we were pictures on the rocks for our dreams to carry as mirrors. So this is kind of a complex statement here, right? I wish we were pictures on the rocks for our dreams to carry as mirrors. So what this is saying is that the mirrors of our dreams, right? We wish we could see them and materialize them in reality, right? I wish I was a picture on a rock for a dream to carry. If a dream could see the picture of me on the rock, the dream could carry me out of this place into the dreamland, right? Could carry me to the goal and the objective and what I dream and long for. However, that's not the case. In reality, it's a wish for this happening. It's an alternate reality that does not actually exist, right? We cried over their children's feast. We saw the faces of those who'll throw our children out the windows of the last space. Right, the notion of violence enacted upon the young generation, violence enacted upon the Palestinian Authority, violence enacted upon the exiles and those who are permanently disenfranchised is another theme of Darwish's poetry here, and the use of the contrast between we cried over their children's feast. Right, there's the Palestinians weeping at the feast of another child who's other. Right, their children's feast, and then so you see the faces of those who will throw their children out of the windows, right? And so you have trepidation and respect paid back with violence and murder, right? And that's a configuration Darwish will retreat to repeatedly in his poetry. Right? Our star will hang up mirrors. Where should we go after the last frontiers? Again, the notion of exile, of longing for a place, of space, a home, a place to pitch your tent, a place to put your head down. But no place on earth will take the exile that is Darwish and that is the people that he represents or tries to represent politically. Right. Where should the birds fly after the last sky? This is again a reconfiguration of the exile motif. Same thing as the last frontiers. If we were birds and not people, there's no frontier for us. There's a sky and there's a last sky. So what would we do if that was denied to us, right? Where should the plants sleep after the last breath of air? We will write our names with a scarlet stem. So again, the configuration of the earth rejecting the plants, the earth rejecting the Palestinian people, and the idea of the blood being written in the final writing of the people as they're erased from the hostile earth. We will cut off the hand of the song to be finished by our flesh. So this metaphor compares life and the flesh and the earthly existence to a song, right? And the hand of the song, that's what's writing the song, composing the song, will be lacerated, will be cut off by the violent act of the earth and by the individuals who are exiled. We will die here in the last passage. Here and here our blood will plant its olive tree. So we have then the literal ending of the passage. We have the last passage of the poem here. We have the last passage of maybe the Palestinian people to another land. It cuts off, the earth devours it. They will die here. Here and here our blood will plant the olive tree. So the olive tree, again, a symbol of both endurance and perseverance and new life, as well as peace and reconciliation. And so the idea that even though the individual poet is being killed or is dying in a sense, or the people of the poet are dying, there's a potential possibility for peace and for rejuvenation through the fertility ritual and fertility myth in the same way for this poem, right? The blood spilled in the ground is that which plants the olive tree. So from the olive tree, or from the blood rather, the olive tree sprouts, and that is again a rejuvenation, a revivification of the spring order, the same way as the dying god in the fertility ritual enacts that. Cool. The next poem we have by Darwish is When the Martyrs Go to Sleep. Again, martyrs is a frequent theme in Darwish, people being martyred or martyring themselves for the faith and for the rejection of the Israeli occupation or for the goals of the PLO or Hamas. All right. When the martyrs go to sleep, I wake up to guard them against professional mourners. I say to them, I hope you wake in a country with clouds and trees, mirage and water. I congratulate them on their safety from the incredible event, from their surplus value of the slaughter. I steal time so they can snatch me from time. Are we all martyrs? I whisper. Friends, leave one wall for the laundry line. Leave a night for singing. I will hang your names wherever you want, so sleep a while. Sleep on the ladder of the sour vine tree, so I can guard your dreams against the daggers of your guards and the plot of the book against the prophets. Be the song of those who have no songs when you go to sleep tonight. I say to you, I hope you wake in a country and pack it on a galloping mare. I whisper, friends, you'll never be like us, the rope of an unknown gallows. So again, pretty heavy stuff, pretty in the voice and tone of Darwish, which we'll see throughout his poetry. So in this case, the poet is guarding the martyrs who may or may not be dead yet. They're either potential martyrs or they're martyrs who've already died and then are being watched over before they're interred, right? When the martyrs go to sleep, it can mean either when the martyrs kill themselves and die, or when they are killed, or when the people who are going to be martyrs in the morning or tomorrow are actually going to sleep, right? I will guard them against professional mourners, which leads us to believe that probably they've already killed themselves, already been martyred in a certain way. And so professional mourners want to come and sensationalize the death of the martyrs, and he is trying to protect them from that, right? He says to them, I hope you wake in a country that has clouds and tree, mirage and water, right? So the idea here is that he's hoping that the individuals who are martyrs are able to awake in a country that transcends the country they're currently in, right? A country that has clouds and trees, mirage and water, that has all the elements of nature that are necessary for life that Palestine is at the current time denied geographically, right? He congratulates them on their safety from the incredible event and the surplus value of the slaughter. Now, this is definitely a configuration of a suicide bombing or somebody who is blowing themselves up and taking other lives with them, right? That's the interesting thing about the martyrdom that Hamas and the PLO endorse and fund is that the idea that the more individuals the suicide bomber is able to kill when they take themselves out, the greater the reward in heaven, the greater their martyrdom means for the cause. And so there's a value given to the murder of innocents and the slaughter of innocents in excess of what's necessary for a political or military endeavor, right? And this is one difference between like military operations and terroristic operations or suicide bombing operations, right? That sets them apart in a way is that the target of military operations, at least if it's going to be Geneva Convention approved or Geneva Convention following, and what the United States tends to try to enact in combat missions is just that kind of cooperation, that kind of clear sense of mission objective, is that the target has to be a legitimate military target, meaning that it's not somebody that we could like take out a family because that would make it easier for us to make a guy confess something, or just blow a bunch of people up because there's a bunch of people there and one of them might be bad. Like that's absolutely abhorrent and absolutely not allowed in any kind of tactical operation the United States does. Now the thing is that the result of most of the Hamas and PLO attacks is exactly that. The desired effect is to kill as many innocent women and children as possible, to make it hurt for the population, the families, to make it grievous for the individuals to continue living there because they might be next even though they're innocent and they're civilians and they're not a military target at all. So the difference being that enemy combatants, people who identify themselves as part of the enemy army, are protected by Geneva Convention because they are uniformed combatants. Individuals who target civilians, individuals who target women, children, unarmed folks who are out doing their daily business in life, as a goal of their operation, have a different moral status and different ethical status as far as the Geneva Convention is concerned. And so the idea here, right, that he congratulates the martyrs on their safety, meaning that they're blown up and they're already dead and they're beyond this life, from the incredible event, the suicide bombing, from the surplus value of the slaughter, from the extra death they caused when they became martyrs, right? He congratulates them on that. That's a rough line, and that's, nah. I steal time so they can snatch from me time, right? Are we all martyrs? So he's talking about, again, like the condoning of the action and stealing time, right? He's taking time out to thank the people who've passed away, who've blown themselves up as martyrs, right? And that pulls him from the moment he's in into their moment, into the eternal moment of the martyr who is configured as in presence of the divine and of no longer the world. Yeah. That was unfortunate. Okay. I whisper, friends, leave one wall for the laundry line. Again, like they're blowing up buildings. The suicide bombers are destroying everything in sight. But he's asking them to leave one wall still standing. Don't destroy everything and kill everyone. Leave one wall still standing for him to hang a laundry from, right? Something practical. Leave a night for singing. Again, don't destroy everything. Leave some beauty in the world, but take as many of the enemy civilians out as you can, right? I will hang your names wherever you want, so sleep a while. Sleep on the ladder of the sour vine tree. Sour vine tree is a configured mythic emblem, which is similar to like the lotus tree or the oak tree or the the cedar tree in Lebanon. It's a symbol of national unity, a symbol of resistance, or a symbol of resurgence and of staying power and of time. Yeah. So he's going to sleep on the ladder of the sour vine tree, right? All right. So I can guard your dreams against the daggers of your guards, in the plot of the book against the prophets. So we have here again, right? Guard your dreams against the daggers of your guards. So we have the ability for either people who have committed acts of terrorism, maybe not suicide bombings, but violent shootings or stabbings or murders in Israel's side, right? Who are then sentenced by the Israeli Defense Forces once they're apprehended after killing folks who are innocent civilians to a number of years in prison or hard labor or death sometimes, right? And based upon the severity of the assault, meaning how many people the terrorist or the martyr intentionally and succeeded in murdering, right, actually killing, there the PLO under Mahmoud Abbas pays the family of those individuals a sum of money equal to the number of individuals that they were able to kill. So the more death, doesn't matter if it's women, children, men, the better as far as the amount of money that goes to your family when you become a martyr and you're captured by Israel and put to death. And so it's a problem because this is like a financial benefit that Darwish is praising to guard them against the death. So your dreams will be pure, even if you're going to be put to death by Israel for the murdering of innocent civilians, right? I'm going to guard your dreams. Like, you know that you're righteous. You know that you're going to make it into heaven. You know you're a martyr. And so don't be worried about what they're saying to you about death and murder and, evil things and heinous crimes against humanity. I'll guard your dreams from the daggers of the guard, from people who will say to you, you're a hideous murderer, that you kill women and children, whatever. I'm not going to allow that to be even enter into the realm of conversation. I'll guard you from that criticism. Again, problematic, right? Be the song of those who have no songs when you go to your sleep tonight. Right? The song, those who don't have a song, the exiled people, the Palestinians, who are deprived of their song by the Israeli occupation in Darwish's worldview, as well as the people who are denied their ability to speak and have a voice in the world stage because they're not a country, Darwish would say, right? Yeah. So he'll be their song. He's singing this poem. He's glorifying them when they have no songs for their martyrs, for they're about to die tonight, or their dreams are going to be usurped by the Israeli guards before they're executed in the morning or blow themselves up in the morning. Right? He says to them, I hope you wake in a country and pack it on a galloping mare. I whisper, friends, you'll never be like us, the rope of an unknown gallows. Right? So we have here the configuration again of country, of longing, journey to the end, to a new land, to a place that can be called home, but yet always remaining exile in one's own country, as well as in the Middle East and the world in general. And finally, you'll never be like us, the rope of an unknown gallows, right? The rope of the unknown gallows, again, refers to the suicide bombing, right? The individuals that the martyr takes with them are unknown, right? There's a detonation radius with suicide death, right? Everybody in that radius gets hurt or wounded or killed pretty badly. And so the people who are there are going to be executed by this martyr, by this murderer, do not know that they're about to be killed in the execution style. Do not know that they have a rope around their neck from a gallows already being tied by the martyr before they even walk into the bus station or the coffee shop or wherever they choose to blow themselves up. And so that's the way to look at it. It's very disturbing as well as accurate, I think, is that the people that the martyrs are targeting, when they succeed, are executed as if a gallows man knows, but they have no prior knowledge of this. They can't prepare themselves for death. They can't retaliate or respond to try to save themselves. They're absolutely vulnerable, and Darwish is glorifying this to an extent, right? So that's an issue as well. All right. So again, when we talk about Darwish, we talk about themes of Palestinian-Israeli conflict specifically. He's a Palestinian writing largely about the political ramifications of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO in the 1980s and 90s, Darwish wrote speeches for him, repeated numbers of speeches for him, and statements for the PLO and for Hamas once they became the authority in Palestine and Gaza. So these are overt political statements by Darwish that are becoming poeticized in this early poetry of his, right? All right. The last one we'll do for tonight, before we break for the weekend, is We Fear for a Dream. We fear for a dream. Don't believe our butterflies. Believe our sacrifices if you like. Believe the compass of a horse, our need for the north. We have raised the beaks of our souls to you. Give us a grain of wheat, our dream. Give it to us. We have offered you the shores since our coming to the earth, born of the idea or of the adultery of two waves on a rock in the sand. Nothing. Nothing. We float on a foot of air. The air breaks up within ourselves. We know you have abandoned us, built for us prisons and called them the paradise of oranges. We go on dreaming. O desired dream, we steal our days from those extolled by our myths. We fear for you. We're afraid of you. We're exposed together. You shouldn't believe our wives' patience. They will weave 2 dresses, then sell the bones of the loved ones to buy a glass of milk for our children. We fear for a dream, for him, for ourselves. We go on dreaming. Oh, dream of ours. Don't believe our butterflies. Okay. So the butterflies again, right? Hello, computer. Okay. They fear for a dream. So fearing a dream and fearing for a dream are 2 different things, right?
For a dream.
Okay. Fearing a dream and fearing for a dream are 2 different things. Fearing for a dream is being afraid of the possibility of having a dream. Right? Fearing for the want of a dream, fearing for not having a dream, fearing a dream will come. Right? Fearing a dream is having a scary dream, right? I'm afraid of the dream. This is not the case here. They're fearing for the dream. Either for the dream as in they're worried the dream will be destroyed or decimated or somehow negated, or fear for it existing at all, meaning fear for having a dream, period. Right? Don't believe our butterflies. Believe our sacrifices if you like. Again, the suicide bombings, the hardship and the pain and the sacrifices that people who are martyrs make them for themselves, right? These are more abstract concepts, though. Believe our sacrifices if you like. Believe the compass of a horse, our need for the north. Right? The idea that they need to be going north into the Palestinian land, into Jordan, the Transjordan Valley, is part of the desire of the Palestinian people, right? We have raised the beaks of our souls to you. Give us a grain of wheat, our dream. Give it to us, give it to us. The idea that the lack of a dream, the lack of a location, a country, a municipality is so devoid that the Palestinian people don't even dream for it anymore. They fear for dreaming it because by dreaming it, it can be denied. By dreaming it makes it substantial, and it's something that cannot happen, right? If you don't have a dream, you're never going to not achieve it. If you don't have the dream of a homeland, then you can't be in exile. If you don't have a homeland ever, you can't be in exile because nowhere to be exiled from, right? The same idea happens here, right? We have offered you the shores since our coming to the earth, born of an idea or of the adultery of 2 waves and a rock in the sand. All right, so we have the shore, of the bank of the Jordan, rather, and the idea that the Palestinian people were either born from an idea, right? The idea of the shore coming in and crushing the individuals against the rocks, or the adultery of 2 waves on a rock in the sand. This idea that there's 2 waves, right, that are committing this creative, conjunctive, fornicating act, right? They come together on a rock in the sand and break, and then all that's left is the isolated, exiled Palestinian people. There's no land they can call their own. There's a mere rock in the desert, which the 2 waves, which are not allowed in the desert because they're water features, right? They evaporate in the desert, and so they're leaving the creation, the child, the Palestinian people, as a symbol, alone, without a dream, without a place to go, without a land to call home, and in permanent exile from both sea and sand, sea and rock, right? Nothing, we float on a foot of air. The air breaks up within ourselves, right? Even the air itself, right, is not substantial. The air itself breaks up within the individual. The lungs one breathes in with are not able to withstand the exile of the poet, of the people, right? There's no air they can call their own because there's no land they can call their own. So there's nothing that solidifies the individual as being grounded to a place or being grounded to an identity or a location, right? They're all ephemeral as the air. That the air drifts through all lands, the Palestinian people drift through without being anchored to anywhere. Darwish symbolizes that here, right? Yeah. The dream has abandoned them, right? The dream has built them prisons and called them the paradise of oranges, right? The promises that there would be a land, the promises and the dreams of having a Palestine separate from Israel and having the holy sites of the Islamic religion related to Jerusalem in the paradise, right? It is something that they dare not dream now. They dare not dream at all because it's being negated every day in their living existence, right? And for the Palestinians, and this point of view politically, it demands and determines its success on Israel's failure, meaning like Israel having access to the sites or having sites control of the sites and allowing Islamic faith to be practiced there, or these people from Palestine to visit the sites, is not satisfactory enough for Darwish. The dream has to be the elimination of the Zionist state, the elimination of the Jewish holdings of these landmarks, of these holy sites, and then the redistributing and reportioning out of these sites to only Muslim services, only Islamic prayers and religious leaders to preside over them, because the again, like the, what does it say? Yeah, the prisons and called them paradise of oranges, that the place where they should have this control over these lands and this paradise is actually the place where they are encumbered and guarded and watched over by the Hebrew people as they visit to the holy sites and they journey there, right? We go on dreaming, or desire dream, we steal our days from those extolled by our myths, right? So if you're dreaming of a dream, you're dreaming of the way things could be, this paradisal notion of what Palestine is or could be someday. You dream not of the reality that could be facing you, not of the present moment and what could actually happen. You dream of mythology, of the Palestinian that's mythologized from the past, that past history that never existed but people want to return to, the idyllic notion of a golden age, of a land, of a people that you never exiled, right? But that can't be achieved or returned to because it is a myth at the end of the day. It's something created, fabricated fictitiously for the political use of Arafat and for the poetry here in Darwish's verse, right? They will weave 2 dresses and sell the bones of the loved ones to buy a glass of milk for our children. That's pretty grim imagery there as well, right? The idea of selling the bones of the loved ones to pay for the milk of the children is the idea of, again, the suicide bombers' families who are surviving being paid off by Abbas or by Yasser Arafat or by the PLO or Hamas to sacrifice themselves for the good of Palestine, and their families will be taken care of then. So people are kept in such abject poverty that suicide bombing or martyrdom as a workhorse to feed one's family and children is oftentimes a meaningful solution, or a solution that's pursued at least. And so the idea here that there's being a double dealing with these folks, that they're being withheld from supplies and withheld nutrition and withheld what they need to survive, support their families, so they will kill themselves. Right, so they will blow themselves up in a bus stop or become a martyr or kill some number of Jewish individuals and then be put to death by the Israeli government. This is the way to feed the children. The way to feed the children is through the death and the selling of the bones of the deceased. The martyr's bones are worth something because he's a martyr, and therefore he can provide milk for his children, not in life by working, not by being a person or having a task, but by only through dying and becoming glorified and then paid monetarily for that is the impact of the poem, right? Yeah, so that's all we're going to have for Darwish today. We'll go over the rest of this on Wednesday when we meet back. Inshallah, we'll have class on Wednesday. The room should be done by then. We'll return to 102, same bat time, same bat channel as usual, and go from there. The midterm will also be due on Wednesday at class. If there's, for some reason, 102 is not in ship shape, then I will have my office open during class time, and everyone needs to come turn their midterm in at that point in time and talk with me briefly about it. If there's no class on Wednesday because the room is not operable, I'll do another recording of the rest of Darwish's work, and we'll do Adonis next week. That's all I have for you all. Hopefully the midterms are going well, and you have till Wednesday to do them as I posted in the group me. And I will see you all Wednesday. Hit me up if you have any questions about anything. I have the literary analysis papers graded largely, and I'm going to be posting them up tonight as well as the comments on the website. So take care, y'all. God bless.